Time now for the Historic Racing News Podcast.
Don't miss the March issue of Historic Racing News. This month features part one of our wonderful interview with renowned journalist, photographer, and author Pete Lyons.
Riding with Revy, it's called, and I wrote it for Autosport magazine, and this is the summer of, or the fall of 1971, and I've published excerpts from that story, but in the book that I've written here, it's the whole thing, start to finish, is in the book. It's several pages, and it's taken directly out of the magazine, and it's recounts the whole story. And it was, I always say, it's the best 5 minutes of my 5 decades of life in racing. It was a, I don't know, I think you could call it a rocket sled. It was a little sketchy aluminum chassis with a little fiberglass body on it. And those cars looked big in the day, but compared to modern Formula One cars, they looked petite. And you had this enormous engine for the time. It was an 8.3 liter engine, I think, making 700 and something horsepower, which was a big number in those days. And for such a lightweight car, and so, I won't say fragile, McLarens were very sturdily built. They were very reliable. It was probably the most reliable cars by and large for the era. But they still were, the tires were big and floppy and soft. The suspensions were soft. There was relatively little downforce. They were only still creeping their way into creating downforce. And so as you're riding in it, the car's doing this up and down, and you could feel the driver punch the engine, and the back end would do this. I mean, it was a sensation that I'd read about, I'd watched, I'd never felt before. And we got out onto the first gear shift. He took me out of the pits. The gears were very tall. It was only a 4-speed box, and we got up to 90 miles an hour in first gear, and then he changed gear. And honestly, for the next thing I saw was blue sky. You know, neck snapping acceleration is genuine, and you have to understand, I'm crammed into a passenger side, which is. Technically, it's for passengers, and it was required in the rules that they look like a sports car, so they had to have 2 seats. But before they banned this, that's another thing they banned. The driver had most of it, 55-60% of that space. So the passenger, the rare passenger ever came along, had to cram down into a narrow thing, sitting like this so that you didn't interfere with the driver's arms. And I had to put my right hand up behind me and grasp the roll bar like this. Teddy Mayer took my hand and he says, clamp onto that. Don't let go. And your other arm is stretched way out over this acre of metal, which is the fuel tank on the left side. And so they showed me how to tuck my fingers over the edge of the fuel tank. And then my feet, to get into the space, my feet were like this. The space was only that wide, and I had to put 2 feet in there. I had to take my shoes off and just wear my socks to get into this thing. So here I am, sitting in this thing, and the Revson's over there doing this, changing gear, and I'm trying to stay away from, trying not to fall out of the car. The first time down the main straight at Riverside, it was a 1 mile long, semi-downhill straight. Very wide. It was built as a drag strip. And at the end of it was a steel barrier. That was the wall that was the big turn 9. And so you're going down this at 185, 190 miles an hour, and this wall's coming at you like this. And you're thinking, Mr. Revson, sir, perhaps you might think about lifting your rack. And finally he did it, and it was... So I really had this feeling. There were no belts. That side had no belts in it, and I was wearing street clothes. And here I am, and literally the only reason I think it felt like I was going to pivot out and go over my heels over the front of the car as we brake. It was that fierce. So it was, as I say, it was a fantastic experience.
Wow. And I bet that stayed with you forever, hasn't it?
It's Hill. I should go get it. I have a model of the car in our living room right now.
Also in March, our resident slot car racer Joe Bradley chats with Simon Owen about the launch of the 2025 lineup of Scalextric cars. Jim Roller, Paul Jurd, and Paul Tarsey will also recap the 34th annual Targa 66 and race retro from England. That's all on Historic Racing News wherever you get your podcasts, available after March 6th.